Hey folks, today I'd like to talk about another two contenders in the Republican presidential primary race. I previously discussed Chris Christie's horoscope, maybe last month. And earlier this month, I discussed Vivek Ramaswamy's horoscope. The good news for both of them is that birth times are available for their correct horoscopes. And for that reason, I was picking the low-hanging fruit and dealing with their chart analyses sooner than later. Both of them are, kind of languishing in the polls. Christie's around 3%. Ramaswamy is at something like 5%. Anyway, see my earlier YouTube post on their prospects for, winning the primary for Republican candidate for president. What that leaves us are two other candidates for whom we have no birth times. Bummer. You hate when that happens. So Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, no known birth times. So we're forced to do something, out of the ordinary in order to present horoscopes for discussion. First, let's have a quick look at what's going on at the polls. And then I will get into their horoscopes. Okay, so here's some results of multiple national polls compiled into a single graph. The time scale on this runs from early January of 2023 up to date. I think this was last updated just this week. In late November. So on the evidence of this, we see Trump was at roughly 45% in the new year, and he's steadily climbed despite multiple indictments against him, up to 60%. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis was around 35% back in the new year, and as you can see, has been slowly declining such that now he's something around 13%. Down in here, green line, you see Nikki Haley, who was along with, Chris Christie, Ramaswamy, and others all around 2 and 3%. But she's been steadily climbing as the months have gone by, especially of late, where she's now running at roughly 10%. So these are the two that I want to look at. I mean, if you just consider trend lines alone, you might expect that DeSantis dips a little bit further while Haley rises a bit further. And remember, we have several months to go before we get into really serious come to grips with who's going to be the presidential candidate for the Republican Party. But I just wanted to set the big picture in terms of polling to see what we're up against. So here we have the tentative horoscope of Ron DeSantis. I say tentative because I said in my intro we do not have a birth time for him. We do know that DeSantis was born 14th of September, 1978, Jacksonville, Florida. Time is unknown. Now, I've used a rectification technique from the school of Krishnamurti Paddhati. It is a bit of an experimental approach. I'm not going to go into the weeds to describe how I'm doing this. Except it involves a prashna and the observation of ruling planets of the moment, which include the day lord, the sign and nakshatra lord for the moon, and the sign and nakshatra lord for the ascendant at the time of the prashna. So with a bit of fiddling around, this is what I've come up with. Again, I can't help but stress that this is a tentative horoscope. But let's see what I got out of this. So I've given DeSantis, led by the nose by this Krishnamurti Paddhati method of rectification, a Leo ascendant. As it turns out, he has the sun in Leo. So Sun, Saturn, and Mercury in the first house. So, I mean, there's one signature, at least, of leadership here, where you have the sun being one of the Kshatriya grahas, is in the first house, command and control disposition. Saturn in the first house as well, too, is, the hallmark of a conservative. And this Sun and Saturn, Saturn's not combust, so, Saturn certainly exerts its effect as a kind of conservative moderator. So let's just run with this and see what we get. Thus far he's run for. He was in the House of Representatives, and then he was governor of Florida, and now he's running for the presidential nominee of the Republican Party. So what has he got here in terms of oomph? Well, Sun and Saturn, Lord of 1st and 7th, form one of the Dharma Karma Adhipati yogas. That's good. Mars and Venus do as well. Notice that Mars is Lord of the 9th, Venus is Lord of the 10th. So this is actually a Raja yoga, and quite a strong one as well too, because Venus is Swarashi in its own sign Libra. Incidentally, this other Dharma Karma Adhipati yoga, Sun and Saturn, is also strong because the Sun is in its own sign as well too. So those are the two dominant yogas in the horoscope. He has a couple of dana yogas as well too. Note, for this horoscope, Leo rising, Mercury is Lord of both the 2nd and the 11th, two money houses. Sun and Mercury combined, a trinal Lord with the dana lords, will create two dana yogas. So that's beneficial. Sun and Mercury together in the 1st, that's Buddhaditya yoga. He has a Kesari yoga formed here with Moon and Jupiter in mutual aspect. Both are strong. Moon is almost full, and Jupiter is exalted. They're in the 6-12 axis, and I sort of like loosely interpret this as, some appeal for the working class man. Interesting to note here as well, Moon is in Capricorn, another sign of Saturn. So the ascendant's in a sign, the ascendant is Leo, but the ascendant Lord is with Saturn, and Saturn is in the ascendant, and the Moon is in a sign of Saturn as well. So hence the sort of, bias for conservative, political policies. He has a Viparita yoga. I don't know that that's going to come into play here, but Lord of the 8th, Jupiter, has gone to the 12th, where it enjoys strength by exaltation. Its only aspect or influence is from the Moon, which is also a Trikashtana Lord. So that's the rule for Viparita yoga, and there's no contamination involved there. So, this is sort of representative of one's ability to sort of, snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Hopefully, not the other way around from his perspective. So, does this horoscope hold water? DeSantis was quite an athlete in his younger years, and during university, he, played baseball for his university, and he was, a high-scoring hitter. So here we see Mars in the 3rd house with a strong Venus in the 3rd house. That's indicative of some athletic capacity, certainly. He suffered the tragedy of his elder sister dying when she was 30 years old. This was back in 2015. So, here, elder sister, Mercury in the 1st house with two malefics, Sun and Saturn, speaks to that to some degree. Plus, the in the 3rd house, generically speaking, a sibling, Venus would be the Lord in its own place in the 3rd. Mars is there afflicting. Incidentally, Mars in the 3rd house is itself what we call Karako Bhavo Anasya, which is, kind of all your eggs in one basket, and the potential destruction of that matter under focus, which in this case is, siblings. That's his one and only sibling, now dead and gone. Interestingly enough, he was elected governor of Florida initially in November 2018, right on the initial launch of his Saturn Dasha. And of course, this Saturn is, admirably placed in the 1st house and forms this Dharma Karma Adhipati yoga as well too. So that kind of holds water as well in terms of, his past. Going forward, what can we anticipate? Personally, I think that this Saturn in the 1st house is going to, be quite a bit of a drag on him. People already complain that, despite all the glad handing on the campaign trail, the guy is pretty much wooden and has difficulty, even forming a natural smile. And a lot of people are, of the opinion that the more he talks and the more that they see of him, the less they like of him. And I guess perhaps that's reflected in the polls that I showed a graph of just earlier. So, Sun is certainly admirably well placed, and it participates in, multiple yogas, Dharma Karma, Adipati, Buddhiditya, Dana Yoga. That's all well and good. And keep, in mind that Sun is indicative of, the command and control function, leadership capacity. So that's good. But this Saturn is a concern. Now, what's going on when He's currently in Saturn Dasha, needless to say, because it just started in 2018. Currently, he's in Saturn Mercury, and come election time, he will be in Saturn Ketu. Now, Saturn Mercury only runs up until end of April 2024. And I guess, the presidential primaries will not have been resolved by then. Too bad, because that's more promising for him, the Saturn Mercury period, than is the Saturn Ketu period. Ketu's position in the eighth house suggests some possibility going off the rails. However, its dispositor is Jupiter, and then this Jupiter is in a Viparita Yoga, which implies some recovery from disaster. But, overall, I'm going to hold my judgment on this. I don't think it's stellar, but, it's workable. And, and the evidence is that he is still in the race. Now, if we flip over and look at Nikki Haley's chart, whoops, I don't have quite the right chart here, and let me fix that right away. Nikki Haley. Okay, so here's the chart for Nikki Haley. And again, I got to stress, this is a tentative horoscope because we do not know the birth time for Nikki Haley. All we know for sure is that she's born 20th of January, 1972 in Bamberg, South Carolina, and we don't know the time. So, the previous month, or even, back during earlier in the fall, I had been puzzling over Haley's chart and had done, a separate prashna under the principles of this Krishnamurti Paddhati method to determine the ruling planets at the time of the prashna, which are then informative to determine the ruling planets for the rectified, or we should say ratified horoscope that we're going to tentatively work with. And again, I'll just mention briefly, without going into the details, that the use of this methodology involves looking at the prashna at the time that you're trying to ratify a horoscope, and you take note of the day lord, the sign lord and nakshatra lord of the ascendant, and the sign lord and nakshatra lord of the moon at the time of the prashna. And then you use those grahas. There could be as few as 2 or 3, there could be as many as 9, and then sort out, which of those are going to be most influential in informing your judgment. And then you apply those ruling planets to attempt to ratify the natal horoscope, which involves, rotating this horoscope until, you find something that you think you can work with. I neglected to mention with Ron DeSantis' chart, I ended up with a birth time of 6:07 in the morning. Back to Nikki Haley, I ended up coming up with a birth time that was 3:36 p.m. in the afternoon. And so this is the horoscope we've ended up with. And, common sense, first it involves faith, I have to tell you, to use this Krishnamurti Paddhati methodology on the evidence of nothing but, a prashna in order to generate a new ascendant for the prospective natal horoscope. But then, common sense does require that you look at that horoscope and say, well, does it make sense, in fact, in light of what we know about the individual's life? So, in some respects, or in many respects, this does. Um, Nikki Haley was first elected to the House of Representatives in North Carolina in her Mercury-Jupiter period. Take a look at this horoscope here, and we see Mercury and Jupiter both in the seventh house, which, being in Kendras, is a good sign. I should first discuss the yogas in this prospective horoscope. Notice Jupiter occupying its own sign in a Kendra. That's a Hamsa yoga, so that's pretty good. Mercury and Jupiter together, of course, form a couple of Dharma Karma Adipati yogas. And now at this juncture, then I can say, well, she was first elected in Mercury Jupiter, which is, quite a stellar combination in her chart. It's said that, sort of the most meaningful periods of your life occur during the periods of lords of the ascendant and or the 10th house. So lo and behold, Nikki Haley's political career was launched during the conjoined period of the ascendant lord and the 10th lord. So when I saw this, I was comforted that, this chart makes sense to a certain degree. And now contrasting DeSantis with a dominant Saturn in the first house, influencing both his ascendant, his sun, and his moon by lordship, definitely a conservative. Well, Nikki Haley's, vying for, the role of, Republican president. So of course she's got, a conservative core, and yet as far as being a conservative goes, she does have what I would consider a liberal heart. For instance, she's very much pro-education and lobbied hard for the schooling system in North Carolina in her early days. She is pro-life as well and wants to relax some of the hard-edged attitudes that Republicans have vis-a-vis their anti-abortion stance. Naturally, as a woman, she is sympathetic to that cause. So, Jupiter's dominance here in a Kendra, influences that to a significant degree, because that Jupiter is Lord of her 10th, but it's also aspecting her ascendant, and it's associated with her ascendant Lord. So there's a number of things here that, make her more of a liberal by virtue of Jupiter's dominance in the horoscope. We might ask, well, does she have, the command and control instincts? Well, when I see this Moon-Mars combination, which is a Chandra-Mangala yoga, yes, that's a common configuration, occurs in one out of six of all horoscopes. But, for her, it does occupy the 10th house, where, Mars does acquire Digbala. And Mars, also aspects the first house as well, too. So if you think back to the last couple of, RNC debates, Nikki Haley came off as a pretty feisty debater, and I thought she really held her own and more in many of these, head-on collisions with Ramaswamy in particular. And DeSantis perhaps to a lesser degree. So, she's a bit of a fighter, and I think, that comes out with the Moon-Mars association, and particularly with this orientation of Mars in the 10th house. She has a Gajakesari yoga here. Moon and Jupiter are in mutual Kendras, also in absolute Kendras as well, too. Jupiter in the 7th, Moon in the 10th, and Jupiter is powerful. So she's got some of this, the sort of schmooze factor, which, DeSantis has as well, although to a lesser degree. I think she's better at it and is more genuine and more, enjoys, the role of diplomat. Oh, speaking of which, she was appointed, let's see, do I have note of that, when she became ambassador to the UN. She was appointed at the outset of her Venus Dasha. So it was Venus Dasha, Venus Bhukti. So take note of the Venus in her horoscope here. It occupies the 9th house, but it's in a Parivartana with Saturn. So lords of 9th and 12th you get some notice of some inkling of, some sort of a legislative world parliament sort of idea with Venus in the ninth, and Saturn in the 12th, some foreign affairs sort of theme as well too, because, of course, the 12th house is indicative of foreign peoples and foreign governments and this whole notion of diplomacy. So this parivartana between Venus and Saturn also holds water, I believe, with respect to her role. Now, it wasn't long. She was appointed under the Trump administration in early 2017, and she only served in that role for 2 years, and then she stepped down. But still, it all occurred during her Venus Dasha, Venus Bhukti. And I think, the configuration that we have here does make sense of that role, ambassador to the United Nations, the U.S. representative. So far, so good. So what's going on these days for her? Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to comment? She has what we might loosely refer to as a Saraswati yoga, because Jupiter is very powerful. Mercury is respectable, aspecting back into its own first house. Venus is in the ninth house. And participates in a parivartana yoga with its friend Saturn. It's technically not a Saraswati yoga, but fulfills the spirit of it. But there's no doubt of Haley's intelligence. She's very well informed, seems to be, and certainly speaks very well. Interestingly enough, she too has a Viparita yoga, courtesy of also her eighth lord, same as DeSantis, his eighth lord Jupiter had gone to the 12th house. With Haley, her eighth lord Saturn has gone to the 12th house. Now, it's under no influence whatsoever from any other graha, except for, the parivartana with the Venus, which does not trouble that. And it enjoys strength by virtue of retrogression. So she too has this sort of Viparita yoga, which, allows one to recover in the face of reversals. Now, currently she's running Venus Dasha and Rahu Bhukti. So Rahu invokes some troublesome stuff, the sun, which is, Lord of the third in the eighth, and it also invokes Saturn, which is, the Lord of the eighth in the 12th. So it's not an easy contest, basically an uphill battle. But on the basis of this, I got to stress this word again, tentative horoscope for Nikki Haley, I like it. I like the Hamsa yoga. I like the double Dharma Karma Adipati yoga that exists here, courtesy of Jupiter Mercury. I like the Chandra Mangala yoga formed here with Mars gaining Digbala. I like the moon in Pisces, which implies a bit of sympathy and compassion, unlike moon in Capricorn for DeSantis. So now I'm expressing a personal bias rather than anything hard and fast. And again, I have to stress both of these are tentative horoscopes based upon a particular technique using the ruling planet concept of Krishnamurti Paddhati, leveraged, bootstrapped by a prashna, which then leads to a tentative natal horoscope. But there you have it. And I think on the basis of this, if I were voting for the Republican nominee, I would certainly favor Haley. And we'll see whether the electorate, or, the, what do they call them, representatives, I guess, who vote on these matters, whether, she can succeed in that light. Well, good luck to her. Okay, so back for just a minute or so to scoop up some loose threads. First, I want to correct my language when I was talking about those who vote upon, the presidential nominee. They are called delegates. So, there's the New Hampshire gathering, and then the Iowa thing, and then I believe somewhere's in the Carolinas, and then other states hosting, including multiple states all weighing in what is called Super Tuesday. So all this remains to be seen how delegates are going to line up behind their particular candidates. Now, Chris Christie's still in the running, Ramaswamy is still in the running. Although, Chris Christie has many credentials. I said in my post, I guess that was previous month, that, he was going to run into a headwind because of, some past issues that would catch up with him. Ramaswamy, I've weighed in with my opinion recently, just a week ago. I think he's very outspoken, and I think he said some outrageous things. And as a Canadian, I really hate the idea that he thinks that he needs a border wall between the U.S. and Canada. That's crazy talk, man. Anyway, so, both of those candidates, I think, are going to fall by the wayside. DeSantis is still in it, and Haley is still rising in the polls. And Trump is, trying to carry the load of, these 91 indictments. So we're going to see how that pans out as these various Republican caucuses, fall into place and the votes are counted for their presidential nominee. There was, so this is sort of a clash of values. I mean, DeSantis is really sort of an archetype of Republican, conservative values. Is a conservative vis-a-vis taxes, critical race theory, the whole LGBTQ question, anti-immigration. He's as anti-woke as you can get. Nikki Haley, although she may stand on some of those, critical planks in the Republican platform, obviously is softer on some of those issues and more, can I say it, more human. And therefore, I think more appealing to the electorate. And so I'll just sit back and watch. I'm looking forward to the debate that's coming later this month between Gavin Newsom, governor of California, and very much a kind of a woke representative, versus Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, the avatar for the anti-woke establishment. That's going to be an interesting debate. So we'll see. Personally, if I was going to bet on all this, I might be thinking of Nikki Haley versus Gavin Newsom when it comes to election time. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so it goes. Okay. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.